Here's how to tie the Distel hitch. You need to start by creating a loop at the end of each cord, and it's usually done with a poacher's knot. To tie it, simply bend the rope in half and then go around the longer end 1, 2 times, and then finally go through both of these turns that you just made and tighten the knot. You could theoretically use other knots for this purpose, but the poacher's knot is ideal because it creates a strong self-tightening loop. Now you should have a loop like this on each end of the cord. Put the first loop in front of the main rope and then go around it 3 times in the upwards direction. Then do a 4th turn, but this time at the bottom. And finally, tuck the second loop underneath this strand over here to secure the knot in place. And finally, clip in your carabiner through both of these loops, lock it, and make sure to tighten both of them. But before you go ahead and use it, make sure to dress it properly and make sure that none of these loops are overlapping one another. It's especially good for rappelling because even when loaded, you can pull it down very easily with your other hand. To learn other useful knots, subscribe to our channel. Here's how to tie the Clove hitch, which is one of the most useful knots to know in everyday situations. To tie it, take the end of the rope and go around the post on the right side, then go around it once again, but this time on the left side, and finally tuck the end of the rope underneath this strand over here and tighten it. But also make sure to dress the knot neatly together so that there's no slack when you pull on it. It isn't the most secure hitch, but it's pretty strong and you can tie it very easily. But what's even better, you can untie it very easily when you don't need it anymore. If you want to make it more secure, you can tie another half hitch around it here in the front. Instead of a half hitch, a lot of people like to do another clove hitch on the top, but I found that the bottom clove hitch usually tends to seize up pretty badly if you do that. Here's how to tie the Klemheist knot. It's a very useful slide and grip knot that can be used for climbing up a rope or for descending it. To tie it, you'll need to create a Prusik loop or a sling, which essentially is a short fixed loop that's secured with a double fisherman's knot. It should also be roughly half of the diameter of the main rope that you'll be ascending. Place the Prusik loop behind the main line like this, with the fisherman's knot over to one side. Now wrap it around the main line 2 or 3 times, like this. Now take the fisherman's knot and go through the other one and pull it downwards like this. Before using this knot, make sure that all the strands over here are aligned perfectly next to each other. It grips very well when it's loaded with weight, but you can slide it very easily with your other hand, just like this. One advantage of the Klemheist over the more commonly used Prusik is that it's easier to slide up the rope when it isn't loaded with weight. To learn other useful knots, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time. Here's how to tie the Super Munter hitch. First, tie a regular Munter hitch by going through the carabiner, then around the lowering end, and finally back through the carabiner but over to the other side. And to tie the Super Munter, again go around the lowering end and through the carabiner, but this time exiting over to the other side. Because of this additional step, it has more friction compared to the regular Munter hitch. This is really useful when you need to lower something very heavy, for example in search and rescue or when lowering very heavy climbing gear. One issue with the regular Munter hitch is that as you descend, the rope tends to twist and turn and sometimes even gets stuck. This doesn't happen with the Super Munter hitch because the additional step kind of evens everything out and the rope doesn't twist and turn anymore. To learn other useful knots, subscribe to our channel. Here's how to tie the water bend knot. It's a very commonly used knot for creating fixed loops for rock climbing. You can also tie it using webbing. The process is completely identical, but for illustration purposes, I'll show it with rope instead. Start by tying a loose overhand knot near the end of the first part of the rope. Then retrace the knot in the other direction with the other end of the rope. When tightened, it should look something like this. If used with webbing, before tightening, make sure that all of the straps are neatly aligned and that they aren't crossing one another. You should also keep the ends rather long because as you put weight on the loop, the ends can shorten over time. It's safe enough to be used for critical situations like climbing, as long as you keep an eye on the ends to make sure that they aren't too short. Another safer alternative is to use a double fisherman's bend. Here's how to tie a Yosemite bowline knot. Start by creating a loop near the end of the rope. Then take the end and go through it from the back side, then around the standing end, and finally back through the loop. You've essentially now created a regular bowline knot. The Yosemite finish just adds another step to it. So to create the Yosemite finish, take the end of the rope and go outside of the loop, then around the right side of it, and finally back through, exiting right next to the standing end. And finally, tighten the knot. A regular bowline knot can untie under heavy loads if a stopper knot isn't used on the end. Adding the Yosemite finish adds more reliability to the knot. You can use it in all kinds of situations, even when climbing to attach to anchor points or to your climbing harness. Here's how to tie the double fisherman's knot. It's used to create a very strong connection between two ropes of similar diameters. Start by placing the ends of each rope next to each other. Put your thumb on the first rope and go around it with the second one. Now go around it once again, this time forming an X. Finally, take out your thumb and pass the working end through both of these loops. This is called a double overhand stopper knot, and you can check that it's tied correctly by making sure that the strands are parallel on one side and forming an X on the other one. Now form another double overhand stopper knot, only in the other direction and with the other rope. To finish the knot, pull on both ends of the rope. This connection is so strong that it can be used for life-threatening situations. For example, you can connect two shorter ropes and then use it for rock climbing. Just make sure to leave the ends at least a few inches long to account for slippage, because as you tighten the knot, the ends can shorten a bit, especially under very heavy loads. It's a bit hard to untie, but not impossible to do with a bit of patience. If you want to learn other useful knots, make sure to subscribe. Here's how to tie the Alpine butterfly bend. Take the end of the first rope and wrap it around your left hand once and place the end between your two fingers like this. Now take the end of the second rope, place it next to the first one and wrap it around once again like this so that both ends cross over here. Finally, take the ends of both ropes with your other hand, place them over and underneath the two bottom strands to finish the knot. Use it anytime you need to connect two ropes. It's very secure and super easy to learn, which is why it's a really useful knot to know. You can even use it for critical situations like climbing, but remember to keep the tag ends pretty long to account for slippage while the knot settles in. To learn other useful knots, subscribe to our channel. Here's how to tie the Blake's Hitch knot. Take the end of the rope and go around the main line 4 times in the upwards direction. 2, 3, 4. So you have 4 loops over here. Now you have to take the end of the rope and go through the bottom 2 loops. So through one and through the second one, so that the tag end exits over to the side here between the 4 loops. But make sure to tighten and dress it properly so that in the end it looks like this to avoid any slippage. It's usually used by arborists to climb up trees because If you pull on it, it grips very well, but if you put your hand over here, it slides up very easily. Usually a carabiner is tied in over here with a midline clove hitch by creating two of these loops, then putting the other one behind the first one and putting your carabiner through both of them. So essentially what you do is clip in your climbing harness over here and then slowly climb up or descend the rope using this slide and grip knot. It is a fairly secure knot, but I would personally tie in another stopper knot on the working end to avoid it from slipping through over here. To learn other useful knots, subscribe to our channel. Here's how to tie the double Alpine butterfly loop. It's super useful to know because it creates two very strong loops in the middle of the rope, which can be used as anchor points or to tension the rope sideways. And the best part about them is that you can use each loop separately or keep them completely empty, and the knot won't unravel by itself when it's pulled. Wrap the rope around your hand one full turn, leaving a large gap in between them. Now do 2 additional turns downwards in between them. Now take the 2 top loops and go over and underneath the 2 bottom strands that form an X. Take out your hand and pull on the ends to finish the knot. But before using it, make sure to tighten and dress it very tightly so that the loops don't come undone when they're pulled. Here's how to tie a figure 8 bend. This knot is also sometimes referred to as the Flemish bend, the Rewoven figure 8 bend, or the double figure 8 bend. To tie this knot, do a figure 8 knot near the end of the first rope. You do this by taking the end of the rope, going under, up, under and through the final opening. Now take the end of the second rope and retrace the figure 8 that you just made, just in the other direction. To check that it's tied correctly, make sure that it forms 3 sets of parallel ropes on each side. You can use this knot whenever you need to create a strong connection between 2 ropes because it's one of the strongest knots out there. This knot tightens as you pull it, so it doesn't require any stopper knots. But when used in critical applications like climbing, a lot of people like to add double overhand stopper knots on each side. Here's how to tie a figure 8 follow-through knot, also sometimes referred to as the Rewoven figure of 8 knot. Start by creating a figure 8 knot at the end of your rope. Take a rather long piece of rope, then go under, up, under, and through the final opening. The finished knot should look something like this, and it should have a rather long piece of rope at the end of it. Now take the end of the rope and go over the attachment point that you'll be using. Now you need to retrace the figure of 8 that you just made, just in the other direction. To make sure that it's tied correctly, make sure that it has 3 sets of parallel ropes on each side. It's a very strong knot that's most commonly used in climbing for attaching to the harness, but you can also use it anytime you need to create a strong connection to a fixed object. The knot tightens by itself when it's pulled, so it doesn't require a stopper knot. But a lot of people, especially climbers, like to add another double overhand stopper knot for additional safety. Here's how to tie the Prusik hitch knot. It's most commonly used in climbing to climb up a rope because as you pull it, it provides a lot of friction. But as you release it, you can freely move the knot upwards the rope. To tie this knot, you first need to get a Prusik loop, which is essentially a fixed loop which is created with a double fisherman's knot. Place the end of the loop in front of the rope and then take the other end and wrap it around the rope. Now continue wrapping it around another 2 or 3 times. Now take the end with the knot and pull it to one side. And finally, dress this knot so that in the end, it looks exactly like this. It's important to do this part because it improves the overall friction. If you pull on it and it still slides, then you can wrap it around another time. The good thing about the Prusik loop is that you can load it in both directions and it still works just as fine. Its only downside is that it will not work with frozen or wet rope. In these instances, it's better to use a mechanical Prusik. To ascend a rope using Prusik loops, you need to get two loops, one on top and one at the bottom. You need to attach the top one to your climbing harness and you can place your feet through the bottom one. Essentially, you need to pull up the top Prusik loop, then the bottom one, then again the first one, and by doing this you can slowly and safely climb up a climbing rope. Here's how to tie the Zeppelin bend knot. Start by creating a bight at the end of each rope and create two loops. The first one should be facing downwards and the other one should be facing upwards. Now take the one that's facing upwards and place it over the one that's facing downwards. Take the end of the first rope and go through the place where both of them intersect. Now take the end of the other rope and do the same thing, just from the other end. To tighten this knot, pull on each of these ropes individually from all directions until the knot feels very tight. You can use this knot whenever you need to connect two ropes together because it's very strong and it's also very easy to untie. It's often used by climbers, mountaineers, arborists, and in similar applications. Here's how to tie the chain Sinnet knot. Take the end of the rope and create a loop, then tug the rope in from the other side, then do it again and again and again until you reach the desired length. When you've reached the end of the rope, simply take the end, pass it through the final loop to secure the chain Sinnet. This knot is really useful to use when you need to wash the rope or when you need to prepare it for storage because it pretty much guarantees that the rope won't be tangled up when you'll need it, and it also takes up way less space. For very long ropes, you can fold the rope in half or even one more time, and then proceed as usual with tying the knot. To untie it, simply take the end of the rope back through and then pull, and it unravels by itself. To learn other useful knots, subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.